me, mister, do you have the time? Are you so important that it stands still for you? Excuse me, mister, lend me your ear.
Hi, Jimit. Thanks for agreeing to speak to me. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us today.
Hi, Chiew. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to come to your blog and ruin it with my ramblings. Um, I apologise for everything that I'm about to say that causes any offence at all. It's not my intention. It's just the way I am, I'm afraid.
How can you say that? I'm the one who has to apologize for robbing you of your precious time. Tell me, what got you interested in language teaching?
I don't think I've ever actually been interested in language teaching, to be honest. I don't like the idea of myself as a language teacher because really I see myself as a teacher rather than a language teacher. And I think that the focus that our profession, if it is a profession, puts on the first part of that, the language, is wrong. And I think I'm very arrogant. Is the manager in me? Um, yeah, no. What I was saying was, I don't. I think it's wrong to kind of focus on the fact that we're language teachers because we're teachers and we've got responsibilities that come from being teachers that perhaps language teachers don't have to deal with. Um, so yeah, I don't like language teaching. I like teaching and I like language and being a teacher of language. I can find a way of bringing those two interests together.
I just love how you play about with words. But you like teaching and you like language. Can't say the same for FL teachers, unfortunately. Like a lot of other FL teachers, you've moved around a fair bit, haven't you?
Yes, you're right to say that I've moved around quite a lot. Were I some sap who believed in horoscopes, I'd say that it's in the nature of Sagittarius man to travel the world. But really, the reasons that I travelled the world were first, I moved from Ireland to England because I was a babe in arms and nobody asked me if I wanted to move. Then I moved from England to Ireland because somebody had moved me to England and I didn't want to live there anymore. Then I moved from Ireland to Greece because I applied for a teaching job in Greece that was advertised in the job centre, and the guy in Greece offered me the job on the phone in the job centre in front of the job centre worker. And if I turned down the job, I probably would have had all the benefits stopped. That's not true, actually. I wanted to go to Greece, but it did cross my mind. I wonder if I can say no. Then I moved from Greece to Spain because the British Council offered me a job, and the job was in Bilbao. And I was very interested in the idea of going to live in Bilbao. It seemed like a very interesting place to me. Then I moved from Bilbao to Madrid because there was another interesting job that presented itself, and from Madrid to Oman because the interesting job that had presented itself wasn't that interesting, and life in Oman seemed as if it would be. Then from Oman back to Bilbao because Bilbao was more interesting. No, it wasn't more interesting than Oman. Oman was a fantastic place, actually. But I'd gone to Oman completely unprepared for life outside the European world. Um, and it was all a bit too much of a shock for, I think, for me and my wife. Ambrose was pregnant, and obviously we wanted Sarah to be born in Bilbao. Um, then from Bilbao to Madrid again, but probably just a lapse of concentration, that one. And then from Madrid back to Bilbao, and then from Bilbao to Manchester, where I've managed to stay. I think it's the longest. I've been here now for 10 years, and I think it's probably the longest I've ever stayed in one place. I'm going right back to the time of my birth here. Not in my head, obviously, I have no memory. Um, but I think it's the longest I've ever stayed in one place. And the reason I've done that is because the bank have got me by my short and curlies and I can't get away anymore.
talking about bankers and such, how are you managing with management?
It's a nice turn of phrase. How am I coping? How am I managing with management? Um, I'm managing with it all right. I don't know if anybody else that I manage is managing with it. I think it's a struggle for some people to have to put up with me, and I can understand that because although I like, all being a manager actually brings out perhaps all the worst things in me, and it means that other people have to deal with them because I've got more power than I used to have. And what it means is that, for example, one of the worst things in me is that I'm very, I don't know what the right word is, impetuous perhaps. I'll have a thought and I won't think it through. I'll think it, but I won't think it through. And because I'm a manager, I can act upon that thought, and that impacts on other people's lives. And it's something that I'm only very slowly. I'm conscious of it, but I can't stop myself. And I think it's probably, if I'm brutally honest with myself, I think it's again the arrogance that I mentioned before. I think there's something there. It's the arrogance of thinking, well, the way if I thought it makes sense to me, so it's got to be good. And I know at the same time that I'm a bit crap at thinking of the finer points. Luckily, I work with two things. Luckily, I work with a group of very patient people who don't always like the kind of suggestions that I make, and yet haven't written too many letters of complaints about me. And then I'm also very lucky because I work with an assistant director of studies who is a lot smarter than I am and a lot more capable of seeing the finer points, and very diplomatic when it comes to usually very diplomatic when it comes to pointing them out to me. So yeah, I'm enjoying management, but I don't know if I could say the same for everybody else. Are they enjoying my management? Hopefully, but probably, well, who's to say? You'll have to interview them.
I'll have to do that, won't I? Tell me, would you rather not just teach?
I don't know if I'd rather just teach. To be honest, actually, I don't think that there's an awful lot of difference between management and teaching. I mean, teachers manage learning and they manage learners, and managers of teachers manage teaching and manage teachers. So it's. I enjoy management now, but not because I think I'm a natural born manager. I just see it as a change. I mean, I was teaching prior to becoming a manager, and I've only been a manager for the last 3 years. I'd been teaching for, I don't know, 11 years. So it's nice to have a break from it. And to be honest, if I didn't put my own position at risk, I'd say that every teacher, there was a book called Diary of a Language Teacher by a guy called Joachim Appel, or however it's pronounced. And he said that after about 10 years, everyone should get a sabbatical. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And being a manager is kind of like a sabbatical from teaching. But it's not a full sabbatical, because obviously sometimes you've got to teach and you're still very interested in what's going on in teaching and in education. So it's a way of getting the best out of both worlds. So I'm quite happy being a manager now, and maybe at some point in the future, I mean, I'm still in the classroom a fair bit, and there's a hell of a lot of contact with students. I'm not the kind of manager that has the responsibility of I don't know, drumming up new trade or anything yet. So I'm not wholly removed from the educational side of teaching, of management. So there's no difference to me at the moment, really, I suppose, apart from you don't have to do a lesson plan every day. Not that I ever did.
Let's talk about motivation. What motivates you and what demotivates you?
What motivates me? is what motivates me is other people's recognition. If I'm brutally honest with myself, I think, because sometimes I think I'll do something well and other people will think it's crap, and I find that very demotivating. But sometimes I can do something and other people think it's good, and I find that very motivating. And sometimes the challenge motivates me too, which is a little bit more honourable. And yeah, that probably the challenge and the appreciation of other people. What demotivates me is the opposite. It's when something isn't very challenging and doesn't generate any pats on the back for me. I'm so shallow.
I've said before how I love the way you have with words, and the name of your blog, Tao Teaching, is a fine example. When and how did you get into Tao?
Well, the idea of the Tao Te Ching, or the Tao of Teaching, started when I was in Greece and I read the Benjamin Hoth book, which is called The Tao of Pooh, which isn't some kind of scatological Eastern mysticist work. It's about an attempt to explain the kind of basics of Taoism through the works of Winnie the Pooh. And I don't think I'd ever read Winnie the Pooh or the Tao of Te Ching when I was at that point. So when I came back to England in the summer, I bought both the Tao Te Ching and the House at Pooh Corner and the other Winnie the Pooh books. And I probably got a lot more out of the Tao Te Ching than I did from Mr. A.A. Milne's work. So that's where I became interested in the Tao, and of course, reading it, there's some great things in it. This idea that you should give up learning and put an end to all your troubles. That's quite a challenging idea for somebody involved in teaching. And so you begin to think about what it might mean or what it could mean. And of course, the whole thing's written in a way that could mean various different things to various different people, which is why there are so many different publications called the Tao of whatever it might be.